Welcome to Bound by Books. I am one of your hosts and contemporary romance and suspense and sweet author, Danielle Bannister. I also write under Danny Bannister, and I am joined today by fellow writer Sherry. Hey, Sherry, what do you write?
Hi, Danielle. I'm Sherry Hayes, and I write steamy contemporary romance and BDSM romance. So, yes, I'm a little more on this, a little more steamy than Danielle, but yeah,
Yeah,
Danielle gets steamy, but not quite as steamy as I
it
get
depends on what book
typically.
that I'm writing. Yeah, I cover all
Yeah,
the S's, the steamy, the sweet, and the suspense. So it just
you
kind of depends
too.
on what the book is. I can't make up my mind on what I like to write. I
Yes,
just
I do remember genre hopping was a topic of conversation
But it's not
last year.
today's topic, so we're not gonna remind me of how bad I am at genre hopping. I know I am aware of how bad I am
Oh,
at
wow.
it.
So you had a recent release here though, didn't you?
Yeah, I released volume 4 of the Where You Left Me series, which is one of my steamier romances. It's kind of like a rom-com, but there's also, some sex scenes in there and some
Mm.
non-fade to black moments in that. So that's going to be a 5-book series. So the fourth one just released, the fifth one is coming out in May, and then that'll be a done
That'll be
series. So that'll be nice to get that one done and dusted so that I can continue with other series that I've started. So
Yes,
yeah.
because you have lots of fun stuff coming down the pike though, because you wrote a story for Yonder,
Yep.
which is coming out here soon.
Yep. That's coming out in April, on April 3rd ish, unless they,
Okay.
it's up to the Yonder platform and when they
Right,
decide to release things.
right.
But right now, the tentative date is the 3rd. They've changed the title on me, so I have to stop to think a minute about what is the new title. It's arranged vows, so I had to stop and think because I've been calling it something else for the better part of a year. So I just have to, reshift and
Gotta
refocus.
roll with it. Just
You
gotta
got to
roll
roll
with
with it,
it.
when
Yeah,
when you're
yeah.
not when you have somebody else sort of in charge of that part, when you're not,
Right.
completely indie, you sort of have to give way and sort of let things fall where they may. And what about you? You were in a pretty good habit of like writing every day and getting closer and closer to something. How is that schedule working out for
Um, well, we had a couple of weeks that were really, really bad. Um, and then it has gotten a little bit better. I have started to get back in my groove, although it's still not exactly where I would like it to be, but as long as I'm making progress, I can't knock it too much.
you?
My life is just very uh Danielle and her planning self tends to stick to her plan
I
very
do.
rigidly.
I do. I do.
My life just doesn't fit in the plan.
You have a planner though, so it's not for a
I
lack of
do.
having a planner or a
No.
plan. You just
Yeah.
really have an insane life. You're like, the day job is not like a normal day job, and so it kind of consumes things in
No.
a way that most other people aren't dealing with
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah,
the thing
I
that
get it.
people don't tell you when you are an entrepreneur, when you own your own business, and writing can be in that same vein too,
Hmm.
because obviously
Absolutely.
it is a business, especially if
Absolutely.
you're self-published.
Yep.
However, when you are running a business where you deal with the public, you only have limited control over
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you never know what the day is going to hold. I
Yeah.
mean, it
It's
it may
true.
be a nice peaceful day and you can stay on to your tasks and
Yep.
everything goes smoothly, but more often than not so much.
Yeah.
It just
No.
something gets thrown in the mix that you were not planning and your whole entire day has to change, timing has to
Yep.
change. um so your day may get started. That's a lot of what happens to me is, I try to get right in the morning and before my day gets crazy.
Right.
Well, if I plan to write from, say 6 to 8 in the morning, and somebody calls me at 7 or 7:30, that doesn't work.
Yeah. No.
Totally it
Yeah.
eats into my writing time. So,
Yeah.
you just never know what's
Yeah.
going to happen and all of that. But we are talking about writing today.
We are, believe it or not.
Yes,
Shocker.
we are talking about writing. Yes. We thought we would talk about the start of a story, the beginning, because that is such an important element from a marketing standpoint to have a good opening, a strong opening, because it can make or break whether somebody, where a reader either continues reading your story or they, DNF it. They just say, nope, not for me. I'm not, it's not catching my interest. I'm going to move on to something else.
Yeah.
So it's a big, it's
gone,
a big deal.
Gone are the days where, you used to be able to give a book 3 chapters. That's sort of been like what I was raised as in school. Give a book 3 chapters. Give your, allow
50 pages.
for
50 pages
for the book, and then but that's not really the case anymore. I think part of the reason is there's been such a boom in independent publishing that window of opening up publishing ability to more people, which is great, but that now means that there's a ton more books now. So if you don't get somebody in the first page or so, they'll just move on to the next book. I mean, there are that many on people's readers now
list,
that they don't have time. I mean, I know that there are some people who are not like that, who will very much, if it's on my Kindle, it's going to be read from start to finish. But when you have a TBR that you are never ever going to finish because it is so long, and I think
because you're constantly adding more to that TBR,
exactly, and I think a lot of us are in that same boat. If a book doesn't immediately pull you in, I'm going to give it a little bit more than the first page. I will probably still give it at least 3 chapters because I'm old. And that's, sort of what I've been conditioned with. But, I'll give up a book if it's not pulling me in.
Yeah, I mean, again, it kind of, there's a lot of criteria there. It does need to pull me in. I would say 2 to 3 chapters is what I would expect to at least have my interest. It doesn't necessarily have to wow me after the first couple of chapters, but I have to at least be interested enough in order to want to continue. And I think that's the important thread there. I think some authors feel like if they don't start their first page or chapter with a bang, that that readers are not going to continue it. But I think it's more, is it engaging?
Yeah.
Is
your character somebody that your reader is going to want to continue the journey with? Because I think that happens sometimes, is that they've made a character that's either not very exciting, 2-dimensional maybe, or perhaps too mean or just somebody that you just have no sympathy toward and no empathy toward. I mean, you could have an unreliable narrator, that's fine, but there has to be something about them that is intriguing, that makes the reader want to continue to read. Even like the jackass characters, if you will, there's some redeeming quality about them to make sure that you keep reading.
Right. There has to be some likable gray area that is like, do I like this person or do I not like this person? And that needs to be conveyed. There needs to be something. So in other words, if you're going to have your character do something, one of the main characters, because we both write romance, so we're going to take that genre and pick it apart here today a little bit. If you're writing a character and in the first chapter or 2 that you're going to have them do something that is bad or questionable,
right?
You also, before they do that, you need to have them do something benevolent. You need to, even if it's just helping an old woman across the street,
or having an internal thought that nobody else knows, but an internal thought that makes them go, oh, you're a human being. You really are kind, but your exterior maybe is
Exactly. So I mean, it can, like I said, it can be so simple. It can be helping somebody across the street. It can be, putting some money, giving some money to a homeless person. I mean, it can be so small, and
Right.
in the grand scheme of things seem insignificant.
Right.
But again, if you're going to have that character that you in the future want me to like and root for,
Yeah.
you need to make them somewhat likable. You need to give them some sort of little hint of redemption before you have them do something that's not good.
Right.
And
Right.
and I'll give you an example of when that didn't happen. I read a book years ago. It was by somebody I had met at a book conference. We had talked, and a few years later I met them again. At the first conference they were a reader. At the second conference they were there with their first book. And I was like, "Oh yeah, really supportive." I was like, "That's great." And so I bought one of her books and she signed it for me and everything was great. And I was like, yeah, I can't wait to get home and read it. In the first chapter, the hero has sex with the heroine against a brick wall in the back alley of a bar while she is just drunk off her butt.
Oh.
And we're in her point of view, so we have no insight into his
Right.
character whatsoever. And that's your first impression that you're
Is
giving me.
is a guy that's willing to, take advantage of somebody who's drunk.
Right.
That's a
And so
hard character to root for.
I'm like, because again, if the author would have given me something, I mean, even if it was again helping somebody outside, like helping it, just anything, something that made them feel human and accessible and redeemable to me, it wouldn't have hit so hard. I would have been like, am I gonna like this or not? I don't know, but
Right.
maybe I'll
Right.
continue. But as it was, it completely shut me down.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't like this person. I have no reason to like this person. And so even though I had a signed copy of the book, I never finished it
Yeah.
because I had no interest in finding out about these
The
two
bad taste
characters
was
and their
was
romance.
placed in the mouth. And so you
Exactly.
you can't you don't get a second chance to make a first impression.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that's really what you authors have to look at a book as being, as their
Yeah.
first two, at least their first two chapters, if not their first chapter. That is the first impression. When you introduce characters, those are the first impressions that you're getting,
Yeah.
that you're giving the reader. And you need to have a good first impression,
Yeah.
or at least an intrigue. Again, I keep going back to that word intriguing, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a quote unquote good impression, but it has to be an intriguing. It
Right.
has to make me want to know more about that character, their story,
I want to
their
flip the
life.
page. I want to figure out what
Yeah.
this is all about. I might not understand it or I might not completely agree with it, but there's something about it that makes me want to see where are you going with this. I'm curious.
Right.
And that may play into too, and again in these first few pages, first chapter, whatever, the tone and your voice as an
Yeah.
author is going to come across in those first few pages. Like I will make, when I go to signings, I make like little mini almost chapter books of
Mm-hmm.
like the first little bit of each of the story, because I think that's a really good way for people to pick up on tone and
Mm-hmm.
sort of get a sense of what the story is going to feel like. So if you can read just a little bit of it and get the vibe of how the author be like, oh, this is how this ride is going to be. I see how this is going to be. You might be more compelled to keep going. So you want to
Right.
make sure that your tone is clear and that your voice is clear so that readers get a sense of, oh, I'm on this ride versus, oh, how I thought I was on the roller coaster, but apparently I'm on the tilt-a-whirl, completely different set of vomit rules.
Yeah. Exactly. So, I mean, yeah, and you want to set, again, you want to set the tone, you want to do all that. So if it's a dark romance, you need to set the tone as it being a dark romance.
Right.
If you are, doing a rom-com, then you need to set that tone,
Yeah, there
you
needs to
need
be
to
some
have,
humor. Very, yeah,
Right. And that, I guess that goes back to what Tina always talks about, one of our fellow co-hosts, Tina Moss, is that you need to understand your genre and what the genre expectations are. And you need to kind of come out swinging with that. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be like, again, you don't have to be in your face about it. I know that like some authors really firmly believe that you need to have an action sequence right at the start of a book. Like
that's a good sort of segue. Like that there are definitely specific types of ways that writers are given as these are the ways in which you start your book. And that's definitely one of the bits of advice out there, starting with some sort of action or some starting maybe like even at the catalyst, that moment where things completely go haywire, and then you sort of backtrack once you've go everything's going crazy, and then as the book goes on you sort of come back to it. That is definitely a method. I'm trying to think if I've done that in any of my books, that particular sort of like, here's the and then we'll backtrack to see how we got there
moment. I know that in the movies and TV shows they do that a lot. I've seen it less in books, but it happens a lot in TV shows. I mean, I mean,
a lot of times in movies that happens.
I know. I mean, even in TV shows, like I've seen like the CSI type shows, the police procedural type shows, they do that a lot where they'll have something happen and they'll be like 17 hours earlier,
right.
and go
that
back
would probably work really well with like mysteries and stuff that it might work really well. Maybe it doesn't work as well with romance, but I guess sometimes the meet cute maybe happens and then you like go back to how it did. I don't know. That is a way that you could start. One of the other ways that you could start is sort of starting the book, what is your character's normal? What does normal sort of look like for your character before this big, huge that seems to be like the most traditional sort of way that stories start.
It does.
And then this is the catalyst and up we go. So that's a very sort of a traditional way to start your book. So if you're like not sure how to start, try starting that way. Start at your normal and then what happens and then up we go on the roller coaster ride.
Right. But I think it needs to, if you're going to use that especially in today, and it seems to be crossing genres. So it's not just specific to the romance genre.
Yeah.
Is that if you do that, there needs to be some ominous notes in there.
Right.
Like the wording and the phrasing.
Or some hinting if it's like romance. Hinting of what the romance is going to be.
That something's going to happen. Like little did she know that, by the end of the day, her, or by the end of breakfast, her life was going to get turned upside down or something to that effect. I mean, you need to have some foreshadowing in there or some hints or something that is like, what's
the hot guy walks in and bumps coffee all over her. I'm like, oh, are we gonna see him again? So
I thought I'd give an example of this. This is one of my favorite books.
Oh, there you go.
The Bronze Horseman, Paulina Simons, and she does a perfect example of this.
Okay.
In her opening, this is a historical story. I will say it's a historical romance, but it's one of those ones that not in the traditional sense.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So it's more of a love story.
Okay.
So a historical love story. So, but she starts this out. Hopefully my eyes will adjust here because, I'm getting old.
I get you. I hear you. I feel you.
Okay. It says, light came through the window, trickling morning all over the room. Tatiana Metanova slept the sleep of the innocent, the sleep of restless joy, of warm, white Leningrad nights, of jasmine June. But most of all, intoxicated with life, she slept the exuberant sleep of undaunted youth. She did not sleep for much longer.
Dun, dun, dun.
If you think about that, it's kind of like, you could take that as, well, she woke up.
Right.
But it's metaphorical
Right.
And if you
It
really,
hints
once
at
you start
something
reading
more.
for it, it hints at something more. So it's
Yeah.
not in your face.
Right.
But it says, oh, well, this is her normal. Her
Right.
normal is that she's relaxed and she enjoys youth and she has this innocence about her. But all of that is going to
Right.
change.
Right. Right. Right.
So yeah, so that is a good example, I think, of
Yep.
how to kind of present the normal and hint that something drastic is going to change. In this
Right.
particular case, yeah, her world is it's getting turned upside down because the story takes place during the Leningrad siege by the Nazis. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on there.
Her
But
world's
you can
supposed
also
to get shaken up. Yeah.
Yeah, so her world's gonna do, but that can happen with romantic suspense a lot of
Sure.
times. Somebody, maybe your heroine witnesses a murder.
Yep.
It gets caught up in this life-threatening situation. There's there's mafia romances where maybe they're like, oh, you're gonna marry this person. We're basically selling you to heir
things have not gone according to plan. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff that can go and happen with that. There's also the starting with dialogue.
Yep.
Option where you can really just
dive in.
Dive in, just in the middle of a conversation. The reader is just kind of like witnessing this.
Right. And they'll play catch up through the conversation. They're trying to figure out, okay, who are these two people and, how are they, but they're thrust right into the story. They're now watching a conversation happen. I've done that in I think a couple of different books that I've started in that way. It's a fun way to start a book. It does force you to like just dive in and start the action, as it were. You're in there, and then you can go back and sort of thread in that, I know normal, but whatever, however you're gonna thread that in.
But you need to make sure it's exciting or at least again intriguing. You need to make sure
it's not a hello,
attention.
hi, how are you? It's not that conversation. Whenever you're it's like that, we're having a phone call and you have that in your story. You don't start with the hello, hi, how are you? I'm fine, how are you? Even though we sort of do that in phone calls, that's boring to read. So you dial the phone. Why the hell didn't you pick up when, you just start,
right,
what I mean?
I need you on a plane in 30 minutes. And then you're going, okay, what's going on? Why do they need to do this? But you got to be careful about doing that because it is, I think in some cases it's overused.
Can be.
Because it's used kind of like, oh, well, this is the default. We're just going to have it happen this way and just jump into the middle of the action and just roll with it. But the thing is as an author, you kind of need to know and understand the type of story that you're going to tell, because sometimes that works in your favor and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you need to do that first one we mentioned where you need to explain the normal and then make things happen, because it becomes more interesting when you can see the contrast. Sometimes jumping right into the action is not the best thing. I did this with my with Slave, the first book in my Finding Anna series. I started it off by explaining his normal day. He's a CEO of a nonprofit organization. And I kind of go into like, oh, he does this. Oh, he's supposed, well, he's going to go to have lunch with one of his college, friends. And it's at the end of the first chapter where he's having the conversation with his college friend that boom, his life, the information that turns his life upside down is revealed. But you needed to kind of see his normal in order for that information to have the impact that it needed to have.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid point. I think it speaks to also the genre in which you're writing, right? Like there are some genres that will play into that sort of action first period. If you're writing an action-packed sort of story, it makes absolute sense that you would start, if the genre probably dictates that things start this way. If it's a mystery, it starts with, you know, I don't mean a mystery, a cozy mystery rather. It starts with a murder. That tends to be the
Yeah.
norm. It starts with a murder. So knowing sort of, that's another, you know, why reading your genre is so important. You need to know what the expectations are so that you're matching it and you're following suit and you're living up to those reader expectations. So if all of the romances in the genre that you're writing tend to start with the character in their normal, that's probably a good place for you to start. If it's starting with dialogue in the particular niche or the genre, then maybe that's it. You know, you can look to that as sort of some guidance. Consider it a little
Yeah.
homework. You know, we get a lot of
Right.
homework as authors, but you know, this is one you don't want to skip on.
Right. And when we say genre, I think Danielle would agree, we do mean subgenre.
Yeah.
Because writing a historical romance and those expectations of how it starts is not going to be the same as a contemporary or a
No.
sci-fi
Correct.
or fantasy
Correct.
or a mafia romance.
Right. And the more you can drill down to the niche of the genre that you're wanting to write in, and you can research that niche, you know, do it, because that will only help benefit your story and make sure that you're in a competitive place and in the appropriate place.
Right. So, Danielle, how do you typically start your things? Or is there one that just sticks out to your thing? Maybe you you like the best, or you looking back you didn't like what you know.
I've got some of those too. Yeah, you know,
I think we all do.
I think we, yeah. I tend to sort of think about the genre and in sort of what genre I'm writing. So like if I'm writing like if I was writing, like I was writing a romantic comedy, right? I want to convey from the get-go sort of the tone of the character. And so like sentence one of this story, it's 10 minutes to 7 and my underwear has already climbed up my ass more times than people have climbed Everest. So right away, we get the sense that she's going to be this snarky sort of character that we're going to have a little fun with, right? She's not going to
She's
mince
not Miss
words.
Perfect. She's not Miss Perfect put together either.
Right, right. So you've got
Yeah.
a snapshot of this character
Mhm.
already from just the first sentence, right? So I tend to try
Right.
to focus on what can I tell readers about my character's personality from the very first line. That tends to be where I go, is like what information can I partake
Mhm.
so that they know this is the character that you're about to spend time with, and you know,
Right.
go from there. What about you? Do you have a method that you prefer?
Mm, I tend to like the I either go with the dialogue depending on the story, what I feel is appropriate, but I either go with the dialogue typically or the normal, you know,
Yeah.
the just presenting the normal to that. It really does depend on the story. I mean, when I wrote Longing for His Kiss, that story has some really sad elements to it. And it's about starting over after the loss of a spouse and finding love again. And so the beginning of the first chapter of that story is just, it just grabs you, you know, right away, because you're in the hero's head and he's on standing on the doorstep outside of one of his best friend's widows, about to deliver a letter from his dead friend. And
Yeah.
so right there, you're like, it pulls you in. It gets you like, oh my goodness, this is going to be emotional. This is going to be so, you can feel
You
his
hit them with the sad
trepidation.
feels right at the beginning. I
Yeah,
see how you
you can
are.
feel it. And then, you know, and that just kind of like pulls you into uh that story. So to
Yeah.
me, I mean, it was the normal, but it was the not normal. It was jumping
Right.
into the action. So I really do kind of pick depending on the story, because I think no matter the genre, as long as you could create the interest, it doesn't really matter how you you start the story. I think there are a lot of options. What you don't want to do is draw out that intrigue. You don't want to draw out and make the reader wait too long, because back in 100 years ago that may have worked.
Right.
Doesn't work so much anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I've mentioned this before about a book I read in high school. It's considered a classic, and the first 6 pages are just a young man standing on a corner describing the street that he's looking at. You can't really get away with that anymore.
No.
I mean, even in literary fiction, I mean, that genre is a little more lax in allowing some wiggle room for that. But 6 pages
ain't gonna fly in
lot.
romance unless you're describing a bedroom scene. But even then, I think that would be a bit much for people.
Yeah,
really good scene.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, it would depend on the scene. I mean, I've read some. You would be surprised how many long bedroom scenes I have read.
Oh, I'm sure. It have to be good and not be repetitive and not be painful.
With BDSM, you can get away with quite a lot because you're having.
I would assume it's like much longer. Yeah, there's a much longer sort of process than it is with contemporary romance, where it's much shorter.
Right, but you have to know your genre expectations. You have to know what works for your characters and your story, and you have to be conscious of the pacing, because I think that even though it's the intro to your story, your pacing matters, because again, you can't wait, like we talked about at the beginning, you cannot wait until you're 30, 40, 50 pages in to create the drama or the action or whatever it is to hook your reader. You really have to do that. If not at the end of if not at the first page, the first chapter, if you haven't done it by the second chapter, you have probably lost most readers. Yeah. It's just the reality of the situation. Like I said, genre fiction is a little bit different than literary fiction. Literary fiction does allow the readers of that do tend to allow more time for a story to develop, but we both write genre fiction, and that's kind of what we focus on in the podcast. And for genre fiction, in today's writing market, that just does not work. I mean, I think the serial market that's emerging with Vella and Yonder and some of the other apps, Radish, I think they speak to that. The more, hook him right away, move it fast.
Hook him in the beginning and hook him at the end of the chapter, because there's this, we want you to turn the page, we want you to buy the tokens, we want you to read more. And so not only do you have to hook them in the beginning, you have to leave them in a little mini cliffhanger with every chapter. So it's a lot demanded upon us as authors, but don't let it get you down. Write your story, get it out there, and then when you're going through your edits, go back and then figure out, maybe then work on your hook a little bit. Don't not finish your story because you're like, I can't get past the hook part. You can't edit what's not written, so get stuff down first and then deal with the hook at the end.
Well, beta readers come in really handy with this.
Yes.
If you are concerned about the pacing of your story, about your hook, beta readers can be invaluable. Get 1 or 2 of them that you trust, that are going to be honest with you. A lot of times you can find beta readers. There are paid beta readers and there are non-paid beta readers. Honestly, sometimes really, if people are fans of if readers are fans of your writing, like huge fans of your writing, but yet they're honest as well. Like if they don't like something, they'll send you an email that says, "Hey, I noticed that this person's name is not, is in chapter 3 is this, and then this part you changed the spelling of his name in chapter 10."
Because I want somebody to check me and be like, "Oh crap," or to also tell me if something feels slow or sluggish or I need more time with. I'm like, you really sped over this relationship. Why didn't you not give us time with that? Oh, I didn't know that you wanted more time with that. Okay, so
Yeah.
Sometimes we're a little too close to our stories and we don't see the things that are
Yep.
wrong with it. So beta readers come in really good. Well, my goodness, we covered a lot today, didn't we? My goodness.
We did. We really did. But I think it was all good information, and hopefully it helps some people who are maybe struggling with how to start their story. If you like this episode, please give us a thumbs up, share it on social media, and until next time, thank you for listening and have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Wait! Before you go, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check us out on our website, boundbybookspodcast.com.